There may come a moment when something inside you changes and you cannot explain why. You wake up on a normal day. Your alarm rings. Your phone is beside you. You know you have to get ready, leave the house, and go to your job. But something feels different. The same job that you once accepted without questioning suddenly feels difficult to return to. The same routine that once seemed normal now feels strangely empty. You may look at your clothes, your schedule, your workplace, and quietly ask yourself, why don't I want to go anymore? You may even feel guilty for thinking this way. You might tell yourself that you are becoming lazy. Maybe you think you have lost your discipline. Maybe you believe something is wrong with you because other people seem perfectly comfortable doing the same thing every day. But what if the real question is not, why have I become lazy? What if the deeper question is, why does the life I once accepted no longer feel the same? Sometimes after a period of deep inner change, the things that once motivated you begin to lose their power. Money may still be necessary, but it no longer feels like the ultimate goal. Recognition may still feel pleasant, but you no longer want to spend your entire life proving yourself. And the idea of simply repeating the same routine for years can suddenly feel difficult to accept. This can happen during what many people describe as a spiritual awakening. A spiritual awakening does not always arrive as a peaceful experience. Sometimes it begins with confusion. You begin questioning the life you have built. You question your priorities. You question the identity you created. And eventually, you may even question the reason you are going to your job every morning. But before you assume that you need to leave everything behind, there is something important you need to understand. Not every loss of motivation is spiritual. Sometimes you are simply exhausted. Sometimes you are burned out. Sometimes your workplace is unhealthy. Sometimes you have been doing something that does not suit you for a very long time. And sometimes something deeper is happening inside you. The challenge is learning the difference. That realization can change the way you look at your entire day. You may still put on the same clothes, travel the same roads, and sit at the same desk. Nothing outside appears different, yet your attention has shifted. You start noticing the moments when you feel most alive and the moments when you feel completely disconnected. Perhaps you feel peaceful during the short walk home. Maybe you enjoy talking with someone who makes you forget about time. Perhaps sitting alone in nature gives you a sense of clarity that you rarely experience inside the office. These small moments can reveal something important. Your mind may have been asking for a different kind of life long before you consciously noticed it. This does not mean that every uncomfortable feeling is a spiritual message. It is important to remain honest with yourself. If you are constantly exhausted, unable to concentrate, emotionally drained, or overwhelmed by your responsibilities, the answer may be rest, support, healthier boundaries, or a change in your working conditions. Spiritual understanding should not become an excuse to ignore practical problems. At the same time, there is another possibility. You may have reached a point where your external life no longer matches the person you are becoming. The values you once accepted may have changed. You may care less about appearing successful and more about feeling peaceful. You may want more time with the people you love. You may want to create something of your own. You may simply want a life that gives you room to breathe. And this is where the experience becomes confusing, because you can be grateful for your job and still know that it is not where you want to remain forever. You can appreciate the income it provides without pretending that it fulfills every part of you. You can respect your responsibilities while admitting that your heart is asking different questions.
There is no contradiction in that. Growth does not always mean destroying the life you built. Sometimes it means understanding it clearly for the first time. Perhaps your job is not the enemy. Perhaps it is simply showing you what you have been avoiding. It may be revealing how much of your identity has been attached to achievement, approval, security, or routine. And once you see that clearly, you no longer have to make an impulsive decision. You can pause. You can observe. You can ask yourself what truly matters now. That pause is important because awakening is not about escaping your life. It is about becoming conscious within it. The difference becomes clearer when you stop asking whether you should stay or leave, and instead ask what this feeling is trying to reveal. Your workplace may look exactly as it did before. The same building, the same people, the same responsibilities, yet your experience of it has changed. Things you once tolerated without much thought may suddenly become difficult to ignore. The constant pressure, the endless deadlines, the conversations that feel empty, or the feeling of giving most of your energy to something that no longer feels meaningful. You begin to notice how much of your life has been running on automatic. The alarm rings, you get ready, you commute, you spend hours at your job, you return home exhausted, then another day begins. There is nothing wrong with having a routine. A stable job can provide security, independence, and a sense of responsibility. But stability can become uncomfortable when you realize that you have been following a path without ever asking whether it still belongs to you. Many people grow up with a simple definition of success: study hard, find a good job, earn more, build a career, buy things, become financially secure. So you follow the path because it seems reasonable. Perhaps it once gave you motivation. Then, one day, a quiet question appears. Is this really the life I want? That question can be difficult because it reaches beyond your job. It touches the identity you have built around it. Who would you be without your position? Who would you be if nobody knew how much money you earned? Who would you be if your job title disappeared tomorrow? These questions can feel unsettling because many people unconsciously connect their identity with what they do. After a deep inner shift, that connection may begin to loosen. You can still appreciate security. You can still understand the importance of earning money. You can still respect the responsibilities you have. But the job no longer feels like your entire identity. And that changes everything. You begin to understand that earning a living and living a meaningful life are not necessarily the same thing. A job can pay your bills without defining your purpose. It can provide stability without becoming the center of your existence. Perhaps the feeling you are experiencing is not telling you to abandon your responsibilities. Perhaps it is asking you to stop abandoning yourself while fulfilling them. And once you begin living with that awareness, the question changes again. Instead of asking, how can I escape this job? You may start asking, how can I live differently even while I am still here? That shift matters. Leaving a job can change your surroundings, but it does not automatically change the patterns you carry within yourself. If fear, comparison, insecurity, or the need for approval are still controlling you, they can follow you into another workplace. A new job may feel exciting for a while, but eventually the same inner questions can return. This is why a period of awakening often asks for patience. You do not need to make a dramatic decision simply because your feelings have changed. Give yourself space to observe what is happening. Notice what drains you. Notice what gives you energy. Notice which parts of your job feel genuinely wrong and which parts are simply difficult.
There is a difference between being tired of a routine and knowing that a particular environment is no longer healthy for you. There is also a difference between wanting freedom and running away from responsibility. Understanding that difference takes honesty. You might discover that you don't actually hate your job. You may hate the way you have been living around it. Perhaps you have no time for yourself. Perhaps you are constantly checking the clock. Perhaps your entire week is organized around waiting for the weekend. Perhaps you have forgotten what it feels like to have a few hours that belong completely to you. When you recognize these things, the answer may not be resignation. It could begin with small changes, protecting your personal time, creating boundaries, learning something new, exploring another career quietly, building a skill that could eventually give you more freedom, or simply giving yourself permission to admit that your definition of success has changed. You do not need to announce your transformation to everyone. You do not need to convince your coworkers that you have awakened. You do not need to prove that your old way of living was wrong. This is your inner journey. The most important thing is to understand what is happening within you before making decisions that affect your entire life. Because awakening does not always tell you to leave. Sometimes it teaches you how to remain without losing yourself. And sometimes, after you have understood the lesson, it becomes clear that a different path is necessary. The clarity comes gradually, not through panic, not through pressure, but through becoming honest with yourself.
There is another reason your job can feel different after a spiritual awakening. Your relationship with time begins to change. Before, you may have thought mostly about the future. Get the promotion, earn more, save enough, reach the next level. One day, you will finally have the freedom you want. But when your awareness becomes deeper, you may start noticing something uncomfortable. Your life is not happening in that future. It is happening today. You are spending hours of the present waiting for a better version of tomorrow. And suddenly, the question becomes much more serious. How many years are you willing to spend waiting for life to begin? This does not mean that ambition is wrong. Goals can be meaningful. Building a career can be meaningful. Earning money can create security and give you opportunities. The problem begins when the future becomes the only place where you allow yourself to feel alive. You keep telling yourself that happiness will come after the next achievement, after the next salary increase, after you have enough money, after you finally leave the job. But the finish line keeps moving. There is always another target, another expectation, another reason to postpone your peace. Spiritual awakening can interrupt that pattern. You begin noticing the present moment in a way you did not before. The morning sky, the sound of rain, a quiet conversation, a few minutes of complete silence. These ordinary moments can suddenly feel more valuable than things you once spent years chasing. And this can make a conventional job feel strange, not because the job has become meaningless to everyone, but because your definition of a meaningful life is changing. You may no longer want a life that looks impressive from the outside, but feels empty when you are alone. You may start wanting something quieter, something more honest, something that gives you enough space to actually experience the life you are working so hard to support. This is where many people misunderstand awakening. They think it means becoming detached from the world, but genuine inner awareness does not require you to reject ordinary life. You can work, you can earn, you can build, you can have responsibilities. The difference is that these things no longer have to own you. Your job becomes something you do rather than something you are, and that distinction can bring a completely different kind of freedom. That freedom becomes clearer when you stop measuring your worth by how productive you are. For a long time, you may have been taught to feel valuable when you are achieving something. A busy day feels like a good day. A full schedule feels important. Being needed makes you feel useful, and resting can even make you feel guilty.
But your existence does not become more valuable because you answered every email, finished every task, or worked longer than everyone else. You were valuable before you achieved anything. You remain valuable when you are resting. This can be a difficult truth to accept when your identity has been built around productivity. You may sit quietly after work and realize that you have spent years measuring yourself by what you accomplish. The question slowly changes from, "What did I achieve today?" to, "How did I actually experience today?" That is a very different way of looking at life. Perhaps you begin protecting your energy instead of giving it away automatically. You stop saying yes to everything. You become less interested in impressing people. You stop competing with coworkers simply because everyone else is competing, and you start noticing how much energy was being spent on things that were never truly important to you. This does not mean becoming careless. Responsibility still matters. Doing your job well still matters. Keeping your promises still matters. But there is a difference between responsibility and self-abandonment. You can be responsible without making your entire identity dependent on your performance. You can work hard without believing that exhaustion proves your worth. You can have ambition without becoming a prisoner of achievement. This is where a spiritual shift can become practical. Instead of asking your job to give you meaning, you begin bringing meaning into the way you live. You may treat people with more patience. You may stop carrying workplace conflicts into your home. You may become more present during ordinary moments. You may use your income to create stability rather than constantly chasing more. And perhaps most importantly, you begin remembering that your life is much larger than the hours you spend at your job. Your job is one part of your life. It is not the whole of it. There are relationships, there are quiet moments, there are dreams you have not explored, there are things you want to learn, there are places you have not seen. There is a version of yourself that exists beyond your professional identity. And awakening can simply be the moment you finally remember that.
Once you understand that your job is only one part of your life, another realization can appear. You may have been searching for freedom in the wrong place. Perhaps you thought freedom meant never having to work again. Maybe you imagined that the perfect life would begin when you had enough money to walk away from every obligation. But freedom is not always the absence of responsibility. Sometimes freedom is the ability to remain responsible without allowing fear to control your entire life. You can go to your job without giving it your identity. You can receive your salary without believing that money determines your worth. You can listen to your manager without allowing their opinion to define who you are. You can leave the office at the end of the day and leave the office behind. That may sound simple, but for someone who has spent years carrying their job mentally everywhere they go, it can be a profound change. Your body may be at home while your mind is still sitting at the desk. You replay conversations. You worry about tomorrow. You think about unfinished tasks. You imagine what someone thinks about your performance. The working day ends, but internally it continues. Awareness teaches you to recognize that pattern. When you notice your mind returning to work, you can gently bring your attention back to where you actually are. You are sitting in your home. You are eating dinner. You are talking to someone you love. You are walking outside. This moment is your life too. It deserves your attention. And perhaps this is one of the deepest changes that can happen after awakening. You stop postponing your life until you find the perfect job, the perfect income, or the perfect future. You begin living with what is already here. That does not mean giving up on change. If your current job genuinely does not fit the life you want, you can prepare for something different. You can learn, you can save, you can plan, you can search, but you do it from clarity rather than desperation.
There is a huge difference between saying, I need to escape this life immediately, and saying, I understand what I need now, and I am going to move toward it carefully. One comes from panic, the other comes from awareness. And when you move from awareness, you do not need to destroy everything behind you. You simply take the next honest step. Maybe that step is staying. Maybe it is changing departments. Maybe it is finding another job. Maybe it is eventually creating something of your own. You do not have to know the entire path today. You only need enough clarity to recognize the next step.
There is also a deeper question beneath all of this. What if you are not actually trying to escape your job? What if you are trying to escape the version of yourself that you became in order to survive it? Maybe you learned to stay quiet when something bothered you. Maybe you learned to accept things you never really wanted. Maybe you became extremely responsible because being needed made you feel secure. Maybe you became successful because achievement gave you a sense of identity. Over time, these patterns can become so familiar that they feel like your personality. Then something changes. You become more aware of your thoughts, your emotions, and the choices you have been making. You start seeing the difference between what you genuinely want and what you learned to want. That can be uncomfortable, because once you recognize the difference, pretending becomes much harder. You may realize that some of your goals were never truly yours. They belonged to your family. They belonged to society. They came from comparison. They came from fear. Or they came from a younger version of you who believed that success would finally make everything feel complete. This does not mean those goals were wrong. They simply may no longer belong to the person you are becoming. That is why going to your job can suddenly feel emotionally heavy. You are not only walking into a workplace, you may feel as though you are walking back into an identity that no longer fits. And when that happens, do not immediately judge yourself. Take a closer look. Ask yourself what exactly feels wrong. Is it the job itself? Is it the environment? Is it the schedule? Is it the way you are treated? Or is it the realization that you have been living according to expectations that you no longer believe in? Those answers matter, because clarity comes from asking better questions, not from making faster decisions. You may discover that the job can remain for now while your relationship with it changes. You may also discover that it is time to prepare for something new. Either way, the goal is not to run away from your life. The goal is to become honest enough to create a life that actually feels like yours. And perhaps that is what this awakening is really asking from you. Not to abandon everything, not to reject responsibility, not to become someone completely different, but to stop living a life simply because you're afraid to question it.